Hey everyone, hope you're all well. Welcome back to the channel. Do you know what? I'm really pleased to bring you this video this week. Something that I've been planning for the last couple of weeks. I think it's going to be a video that will really help other athletes out there that are considering taking the coaching route in their triathlon training. For those people that know me and for longer subscribers, you will know that for a very long time I was a self-coached athlete. And this year I decided to take the plunge into the coaching world and get myself a coach. So I want to welcome you to this week's video, and that is meet my coach, Mr. Phil Ellison. So before we begin, Phil, I just want to say, a huge thanks for coming onto the channel and joining me for this, I don't know what we want to call it, an athlete coach type interview chat. As I say, I'm not quite sure what to call it, but for the viewers, Phil is a coach for Total Triathlon Training, and I approached you, I think it was back end of the summer or start of autumn or something like that. And that was really to coach me. I mean, I felt it was a time or a point in my journey that I needed some additional input and for someone else to take a look at what I was doing and the approach I was taking. I certainly felt that, I'd taken myself as far as I could go. Now, I'm not going to go into too much about you, Phil, as I thought I'd leave that, that part to you. So can we just start by you giving a little bit of background into your world and talking us through your journey within the sport, where you're based, when did you get into triathlon, and how, I suppose, this has led you to becoming a coach at Total Tri Training?
Yeah, it's been quite a long journey. Now you're looking back, I had a little think about this before, and it's took a long time to kind of get to this point now. I have been involved in triathlon to some extent, probably for the best part of 20 years now, I'd say. Wow. From when I first dabbled, like most people, the story's not too unusual in that, somebody within your social circle sparks your interest in a sport or something, and you think you'd like to give it a try. And, that first one I remember was at Trenton Gardens in Stoke. And it was sponsored by Gatorade at the time. And a friend of mine was doing the middle distance, or like the half Ironman distance. And I entered a super sprint, and I borrowed a racing bike, and I bought a triathlon suit from Aldi, I think at the time, and I was racing essentially because it was an introductory race. I was probably, early 20s, 21 or something like that. I was racing against kids of 12, 13, 14 was the majority.
I know that feeling.
The guy that I was racing against. But it was fantastic. I did the race, quite enjoyed it, and then watched my friend from university finish the half Ironman and go on to do Ironman Austria. And so that was that was really the first bit of inspiration I took from it. Previous to that, being from the northwest of England, it is very much team sports and rugby league particularly. So my background, again, like a lot of people, when they get into triathlon, was from team sports. And when I look back on that now, what was really interesting is I always loved the training as much, if not more sometimes, than the matches. I love pushing myself on a Monday and a Thursday night in training. I like to be the first to get around the pitch, or the one to do the most press-ups, or, to hit the tackle bag more than, it was all those little competitive elements that I noticed in myself, not at the time, but looking back on it. And I then went to university and then lost touch with rugby. And then coming out of university, I just wanted to remain engaged in fitness. So I joined the gymnasium, did a lot of gym training, a lot of weight training, challenges on the rowing machine and stuff like that. And got really quite fit, but with no real direction to it. It was just passing time. And it worked quite well because my wife worked about 2 hours longer per day than me. So I'd finish work and then I'd go straight to the gym, and then we were both still getting home at the same time. So it worked quite well from a family perspective that way as well. And then, from first tasting that little bit of triathlon, I probably only did 1 or 2 a year. and then just but was naturally, even with not much of a swim background, like a lot of us and can relate to, I was still, sort of getting a top 10 in a sprint distance race, and then it became a top 3, and that was only with doing, a minimal triathlon training. It was just through remaining very fit through gym training. And then obviously you start to then think, well, if I did this a bit more, maybe I could be quite good at it, but maybe other things need to give a little bit. So that happened naturally, really, and I just progressed over from the gym training into triathlon. The main thing I think that changed my life direction as far as sports concerned is I developed a back condition, which it went undiagnosed for about 12 years and was really quite severe. And it eventually was diagnosed as an autoimmune condition. So my body fighting itself and causing inflammation in the joints at the bottom of my spine. The problem with that is for 12 years, I could run for maybe a couple of months, and then I might have 6 to 9 months of just being able to walk, never mind able to run. So, I could always train in the gym, which was good, sat down and things, but I just couldn't really do the triathlon training. And then luckily got a diagnosis about 12 months later, got an injection via sort of an application to the Primary Care Trust to say, like, this guy's failed on all these other treatments. Can we please pay a lot of money to give him this injection every month? Yeah. And they gave it the okay. And within 48 hours, the pain was gone. And so that changed, as a lot of people would probably do. I then signed up for an Ironman 11 months later to make the most of that and think, well, I don't know how long this back's going to be good for. Let's get on with life. And something I really want to achieve is the Ironman. I looked then in the calendar, what's the furthest one away? And it was Barcelona. And so I signed up for that, and that was my goal then. And then I've never looked back. Once I made that move, it's just been onward and progressive all the time.
Okay, pretty impressive resume there, I think.
Well, it's extensive, but it's familiar, isn't it? Lots of people get, dabble a little bit, and then they set themselves a goal, and then it becomes a bit all consuming then, doesn't it?
So how long have you been a coach with Total Tri Training?
I dabbled a little bit, just coaching a few friends, like you do when you're interested in the scientific principles, and with my background in the NHS as a physio, that's very much about coaching people. It's not just about prodding them with your thumbs, although there is quite a bit of that as well. But it's also about coaching them to help them do what's best for themselves. If you think they need to rest more or exercise more, you need to get the best out of people. It's not just about sticking your thumbs in them or hooking them up to some electrical device while they're in the clinic with you. So I think that led into that coaching sort of just as an ad hoc thing with some friends. And then I sought some coaching myself to take my own performances to the next level and take my own thinking out of it. Because sometimes you do make bad decisions yourself when you're looking after yourself. It's easier when you're looking after other people.
Yeah. I could relate to that.
It's when you really look into it, we do treat ourselves differently than we would treat other people, and the advice that we would give others, we don't often subject ourselves to, because we're involved in it too closely, I think, and we're not taking that step back and thinking what's best. So I sought some coaching from Total Tri Training and Chris Standard, who's one of the head coaches there. And through that process, that reaffirmed to me that that's something I enjoy. Not only did I enjoy being coached and actually devolving the decision making to somebody else, but also at the end of it, my performance is really improved. And I actually thought I want to do this formally as well.
Right.
So that was probably about 3 years ago when I started to coach with TTT, and then it's just grown, quite organically and naturally from that point.
Okay, great. Okay, so let's touch a little bit back on your actual racing. So I'm assuming you still race yourself?
Yeah. I obviously my passion is triathlon, and I think I've likened it to like again, team sports, you've got young boys who hope to be a professional footballer or a rugby player, and very few are able to do that. But what triathlon allows you to do, although you're not paid for it, essentially, is it allows you to remain engaged with other people who enjoy the same things. You can also compete and perform on the same day, on the same course as some of the the professionals in our sport. So it's fantastic from that point of view. And then, to be able to coach it as well at the same time, it's then, it is very much like a kid getting to do what they absolutely love. And maybe, that ideal scenario of actually getting paid for what doesn't feel like work, which is essentially, an amazing opportunity, really. So my racing has been at various distances. Previously, the shorter distances, mainly because of the back problem that I had, and then I've moved up to once you sort of go towards the longer distances, it can be quite addictive, like a lot of things. The anxiety and the preparation that comes before a middle distance or perhaps a long distance race, and then the sense of achievement. At first, just through literally finishing the race, it almost doesn't matter what's happening around you. Just the ability to be able to finish is quite addictive.
Yeah, and I recognise that, particularly when I stepped up to middle distance. Like there's just a different level of pressure on you, knowing that it's going to take a lot more out of you and your body and that kind of thing. And I remember when I stepped up first time, I thought, all right, the goal was just to complete this thing, get through it. Yeah. What was your last race that you did?
The last race I competed in, I think, was probably the 70.3 in Staffordshire this year.
Right, okay.
I'm now in the 40 to 44 age group. I was fourth in that, which, to be honest, I was really happy with. I would normally hope to podium.
Pretty good.
It is. I'm certainly not complaining. I would normally have aimed to sort of podium, but unfortunately, like a lot of people, I'd developed an Achilles injury in the sort of 3 to 4 months before, and I'd really not been able to run much. I'd not been able to run much at all. So focused on the swimming. Luckily, we had a reasonable period without being locked down at that point, and I was swimming 4 to 5 times a week. So I did improve my swimming, which was good. The biking was just solid as I would normally expect, and I think one of my best bike performances to date. And then the run was just. It wasn't as I would hope to do, but it was, it was good enough to still stay in the hunt for a medal or whatever. Yeah.
I think we race in the same age category, but there's not much competition here. I'll tell you now.
Let's see in another 12 months.
So, do you have any races that you're planning on doing for the 2022 season?
Yeah, loosely, I've got some structure based on events that have been postponed from previous seasons, and also personal goals as well. So aiming to get my running back on track and to try to, push that forward now that my Achilles is feeling a bit better now. So I've signed up for Manchester Marathon, which is the beginning of April. And that's, again, not as a massive sort of goal, but basically to give me a focus for this next 2 or 3 months. So I'll work on trying to build my sort of 5K speed, and then I'll progress that to 10K, and we'll do almost like a reverse periodization sort of thing. We do the harder, more intense sessions earlier on, and then we'll build the distance and try to hold that, distance sort of speed endurance for longer, and then build that to the marathon. And then that should lead me towards Challenge Roth, which is in July. So when I was lucky enough to qualify for Kona, that sort of ticked that box from an Ironman.
I was going to ask you, what is your proudest moment as an athlete? So I'm assuming that's probably one of them if you've qualified for Kona.
Yeah, there was 2 aspects to that, really. Firstly, the actual performance that I managed to put together at Ironman UK in 2019 was probably the proudest moment, because I executed, for me, a close to perfect race. There was a few issues, as you'd expect with an Ironman. It's a long day and things do go wrong. But the little things that went wrong, I got back on track. They didn't really affect me mentally. I stuck to my plan, with sort of nutrition and pacing and everything else. And so the day actually went really quite well. And I probably couldn't have asked for much more, even on an absolutely perfect day. And I managed to win the age group overall. And because there were no pros racing, I was 9th overall in the race, which is just, it's a very special place to be when you're running around Bolton and there's only a few of you actually on the course. for maybe the first half marathon. It's very, very quiet. And
yeah.
so a lot of the support feels like it's for you. And with being, you know, the swim at Pennington Flash is 20 minutes from my house. So it's a local race. There were quite a few people about who knew me and were shouting for me on the run particularly. So that was probably my proudest moment. That the achievement was then kind of a little bit secondary to that. I was very proud that I did, you know, performed well and achieved something within that race. The Kona thing is just, obviously it's a total bucket list. You know, I was absolutely over the moon, and to get there and then experience that. Although the flip side of that was, it was my 4th Ironman in the year, and I was absolutely shattered, riddled with
it's quite a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, I was riddled with a few niggles and injuries, and we treated it as a family holiday. So we went to San Francisco. We did the diving with the dolphins and the manta rays, and we just the race was secondary. So it was actually probably one of my worst performances.
The experience
as a triathlon, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, it does not matter at all. It was just about experiencing Hawaii. So yeah, they were definitely, you know, highlights by far. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So we've touched a bit about your athletic background. Now you've also got a background in sports rehab and injury, and I certainly know that was something that appealed to me when I was doing my searching and my research, as I thought it'd be useful for me, particularly with, you know, my history of running injuries. I seem to be cursed at the moment.
Yeah.
So if you can you tell us a little bit about how that fits in with your, I suppose, your coaching philosophy and you know, I'm sure there's a whole wealth of knowledge there that informs some of your coaching. It'd be good to get your take on that.
Yeah, no problem. I think the underlying sort of aspect to it is that because I went to university and finished in 1999 and then went straight to work as a physio, it's a very sort of academic and scientific sort of background to things. And I suppose you don't realise at the time, but that then starts to change the way you are as a person and your character. And I obviously would always look for evidence for things. You know, if we're performing some sort of treatment with patients or to patients, then it has to be evidence-based. You can't just make things up, or you can't do it anecdotally because it worked for one patient, because it may not work for another. So you start to question a lot of things, and you look for the best evidence. And that's kind of the way I am with triathlon. I try to read through why we do things at certain times of the year. And if you're doing a certain session, what is the best way to approach that session? With regards to the injuries as well, it's obviously, it's just so common that with the sort of stresses and strains that triathletes put themselves through, that injuries will occur. You know, they will, no matter.
Accept that.
Yeah, we can try to reduce them by putting, you know, preventative strategies into place. We can try to moderate any increases in training intensity and volume. You know, we can make sure people don't do things too quickly and too aggressively. But ultimately, we will still, you know, get some niggles and some injuries. And I think what's really important is where I try to get involved quickly is when people comment to me within the Training Peaks notes or on text messages, you know, oh, I've had this niggle here. And then it's a case saying, well, hang on, is it something we need to act on immediately? Should we be backing off the running for just the next 4 or 5 days to let it settle while it's only, you know, very, very mild? Whereas your tendency as an athlete would be to see the next run session and think, well, I've got to do it. It's in my plan. It's the best thing for me to do. I've got to get it done. And then obviously this is where the communication we have on Training Peaks is vital, and why I have this like open door policy for people. Really, you know, you can get in touch with me as much as you like. I would rather we have a couple of days easy and then have nipped something in the bud than encourage you to push and push, and 2 weeks later you're then off running for 6 weeks or something to allow an injury to settle. So that's where the sort of physio background comes in, and obviously I'm happy to give physio advice as well. So I suppose one of my USPs as a coach is that I am a qualified, you know, experienced lower limb physio at the same time. So I've got the ability to provide that as part of my coaching package. And that's an added, you know, just a little added benefit, really, I suppose.
Now, I mean, I know that I'm aware that you're actually reducing or leaving your role within the NHS, and but you know, the viewers won't know that. And I suppose what I'm trying to get at here is is how have you got to that point? As I assume, you've got a number of athletes which has grown over the last couple of years. And I suppose what I'm trying to get at is how you manage to balance everything in terms of all those athletes and coaching those, the sports rehab work, your own racing, your own training, and I suppose as well, making sure you've got family time.
Yeah, exactly. And we all struggle with that balance, don't we? And at the end of the day, we are amateurs, we're age groupers. And although we like to think of ourselves as professionals, I certainly don't coach you guys as professionals, because I wouldn't expect you to put yourselves through the rigor of what they do, because you need to remain with some form of balance in your life, whether, as you said, that's social or work or whatever. For me personally, my regional plan was to coach sort of part-time, was to get to maybe 20 or 30 athletes at maximum, to be able to then reduce my hours in the NHS and find a nice balance between the two. So I do work with some amazing foot and ankle surgeons in the hospital, and their mentorship of me over the last 10 years has been fantastic. And I've developed as a person, my knowledge base and my skills as a physio and as almost like a doctor working within a fracture clinic. That's been invaluable. And I was a little bit hesitant to lose that. So the idea was build the coaching for the enjoyment and to basically equal out my pay. So whatever hours I reduced from the NHS, the coaching would match that
supplement up. That,
And I got to that point probably 3 or 4 months ago. And then I've had more inquiries about coaching, and I've been a little bit hesitant. And I didn't want to give my identity up as a physio as well. But ultimately, I absolutely love the coaching. I get so much joy every time I look at Training Peaks and I'm able to comment and help people. And in the NHS, you do get that on occasion. But as everybody knows, particularly with the recent COVID pandemic, and with all the changes that we're having to go through, and our clinic structure is not as good as it used to be. We're not seeing patients as efficiently, and you just start to lose job satisfaction. The majority of my work is NHS with a little bit of private practice, mainly for some athletes, just through word of mouth and stuff. So I've now made that decision that I've handed my notice in the NHS. That will be finishing at the end of January. I will then, over about 12 months, look to grow my athlete numbers again, and it will be my full-time profession, and again, hopefully something that will just grow, over the next number of years.
It's a good journey. I think we can all aspire to that.
I'm not complaining at all.
Right, now, you of course would, I suppose, advocate coaching, obviously being a coach. And I suppose the next question is really for any viewer out there that may be thinking of taking the plunge, into the coaching world of being coach. What do you see as the key benefits for any athlete that's considering being coached?
I think there's obviously a few. I think I'll try and get them in maybe in the right order as to which reasons I think they're useful for. I think one is the planning is done for you. So you don't have to spend time procrastinating, putting sessions off, deciding on a day-to-day basis what's the right thing for me to do. But in order for that to work, you need to trust in the coach that you've chosen, and you need to almost accept that accountability to them. So accountability is a fantastic one. It's talked about quite a bit, but as we know, and as you know already with your training and the Training Peaks itself, just as a platform, having these sessions day to day to tick off, and knowing that I will look at the data and I will give you some feedback, and I will obviously notice if you miss a couple of days, etc. Yeah. It keeps you accountable. So, in the times when you're a bit low on motivation, the dedication comes through, because you know that somebody has given you that session and it's in your best interest to do it. And obviously motivation, it can be a struggle sometimes. There are weeks and months of the year where we feel massively motivated and training comes easy. Maybe the family and work life are all in balance and everything's going great. But it doesn't take much to upset that, and motivation can wane for a while. And I think accountability then comes in, and that then is often the driving force to help you stay on the path. Ultimately to the goal, it's your goal, it's what you want to achieve. but it's not going to be a smooth road, and the coach can really facilitate that. And I think that's where, one of the reasons that a coach is more advantageous than a training plan, an online training plan, which is generally a lot less expensive. But you have to fit that around your lifestyle, and there isn't much guidance to most of the plans.
No, they're very generic, aren't they?
Yeah, but they are, they're probably a step up from coaching yourself, perhaps, depending on your levels of knowledge. And if you have a 9-to-5 job where you can fit your training in quite easily, maybe you've not got kids or whatever, I think it could be useful. I'm not going to say that there isn't a place for those. And if you're on a very limited budget, then obviously, again, it's probably a reason to use one. But as you know, with your injuries that you've suffered with, and you'll see a lot of the messages that we send in backwards and forwards, the plans are really dynamic. I set them a week at a time, but we're adapting them as a need. I know I can take runs out at short notice and put something else in its place, and that's really, I think that's the other sort of goal, and the other main thing with coaching is that it helps you remain consistent. You should be reproducing similar effort levels week after week after week after week, and those blocks of training without any real hero sessions. It's only on occasion we ask you to do something that is absolutely out of this world. The rest of it is just consistent training, and the coach relationship really, really helps with that, I think.
I certainly think that adaptability is definitely helpful, particularly when things go off the rail, or life gets in the way, or you like you say, injured. No, they do. You're right. You're absolutely right.
And as you know, what I try to do is highlight the key sessions in a week. So, for most people, they'd probably have a maximum of 3, occasionally 4 sort of key sessions. They're not always the hardest sessions, but they're the key sessions that relate to the goals of the training plan at that time of year. So I'll try to mark them and highlight them in the notes to you and in your session plans to say, even if things go wrong this week, if you could get those 3 or 4 sessions done, the majority of your week has gone to plan. And if other things have to be lost or dropped, or if we have to rearrange the week, we should do, but we'll still try to keep the key sessions in as best we can.
Okay, great. So as a coach, Phil, you've been doing it a couple of years now. You've probably witnessed some memorable races with your athletes. You've probably had some great achievements, but what would you say is your proudest moment, or it might be a small collection as a coach?
It varies massively. I take satisfaction in a lot of the comments that I receive on a weekly basis. So as we've just mentioned too, with the WhatsApp group, with personal messaging, and with the feedback on Training Peaks, people sometimes just put comments that reassures me they've made a good decision for themselves on that day. And that can sometimes be how they approach a training session. It could be the fact that they did something a little different. It might be the fact they took a rest day. There can be various things in their comments, but I take satisfaction then from thinking, well, actually, I'm educating them, I'm mentoring them, and I think actually they made a good decision on that day. And that's nice for me to see, definitely. Performance-wise, it would be easy for me to look at the guys who achieve really good things in the sport. We've had a couple of guys, achieve Kona qualification, well, one for Kona and one for St. George in Utah. So that they obviously stand at the top of an achievement list, particularly when one of the guys went through long COVID, and we spent some time sort of nursing him through 6 to 8 months.
I saw that post. I think
the inability to train. So that's really rewarding, because he was in a very low spot, and sort of 18 months later, or 12 months later, he's reversed that and actually achieved his A goal in life, as far as triathlon is concerned. So that is obviously one of my highlights. And then, various people have achieved Great Britain honours, whether it's, sprint distance, Olympic distance. So that's easy to identify as some of the major, performances. But I think the other thing is just when people have noted improvements in their quality of life, or improvements in their family life, or there is one text from one of the guys in our group that will always stand out with me for quite a while, and how he mentioned that his life was better how his balance in work and family life, how his family preferred him as he was. Now he was training regularly. And that to me means as much, you know, as the performance base. And that's again what coaching can help people with is getting the best from themselves in a manageable way that doesn't tax their family too much as well.
Yeah, I think one of the things I said to you previously was around my access to groups and other triathletes. I mean, I live in a part of London that's it's pretty deprived. I mean, I'm quite fortunate not to be in that position.
Yeah.
And, you know, I can access this sport. And I do think, you know, this sport, when you go to races, particularly a lot of the race, it does seem like a middle class sport in some sense. It's, you know, it takes some, you know, investment to get into it initially. You can do it on a budget, but yeah, ultimately you do need to spend some money to get into this. But for me, one of the benefits I've seen is having access to the you know, the group, to some of the coach sessions that you're doing. We've got one later, haven't we? You know, that kind of thing, because I just don't have those groups in this area. You know, the closest I think triathlon club to me is probably 40 minutes in the car, which is not ideal. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I sort of, you know, pushed out to you and was looking for that, you know, and that all relates to that accountability, to, you know, to the social aspect, and it's been great so far on that respect for me. We obviously have two aspects to that. We're lucky enough by being part of this bigger brand of Total Tri Training. We've got group activities and the Facebook group and stuff, which is closed off just for the TTT members. And you know, we've got in the region about 400 people on that. So that's obviously the wider community, which hopefully you'll feel part of. Yeah. And then obviously my own group is now in the region of about 30. And that's, I'm you know, that's another thing I'm really proud of is that people now will support each other within that group. And I've even dropped into looking at Strava, and loads of my athletes are commenting and supporting each other. You know, a lot of them I've only met in, you know, the real world once or twice, and some of them never. But because we've prospered a nice group atmosphere, I'm, you know, that as much as anything, I'm really proud of that. And we just got to keep that going. Yeah, I mean, that probably leads on to the next thing that I was going to ask you, because you're planning to come down south to see, you know, your London-based athletes at the end of January, which I'm actually really looking forward to. I think Total Tri Training has predominantly been based in the north, but their reach, I think, is slowly spreading, isn't it, across the country. Now, for us, I see, you know, that as a huge benefit in the ability to meet the other athletes in the group, as well as having access to you, which is the coach. But what I'd like to do is get your take on it in terms of how you go about managing that, in terms of like the meetups, considering you've got different athletes, possibly at different points in their training progress, their ability. How do you do all of that? What's the main purpose of those meetups?
Yeah. I think I'll sort of give a bit of background to that as well. I think as far as meetups are concerned, we've obviously now got the ability to do a lot of this in the virtual world, haven't we? Particularly with the bike workouts, with Swift workouts and things like that. The good thing about that is that we can keep people on similar schedules and similar sessions, but we can change them subtly based on an athlete's ability or their physiology underlying that, or their injury profile. So I could still, like this evening's session where we're doing some sweet spot bike work. I'm looking at what athletes have done in the weeks coming up to it, and I might change the targets a little bit. If somebody's not been doing sweet spot up to now, maybe they've had a month off or some time off over Christmas, or they've had COVID, or they've had an illness, I will still keep them on a similar session so they can be part of it, but I will change the targets. I will keep the intervals roughly the same so that we can all be following the same kind of plan. We'll all be on the bike using the Discord channel to chat and to, you know, some of that so I can coach it and help people get the most out of the session. And also, you know, interestingly on Sweet Spot, to hold people back a little bit, because the whole point of Sweet Spot is that it's sustainable sort of power and effort over the duration of this longish bike session. And it would be easy if you're doing it on your own to just keep that overachieving mentality and want to push a massive first out. And then you may not get to the end of the session, or you might find yourself failing towards the end. So that's one thing I think is important with the meetups. And that's where the virtual stuff comes in really handy, because we couldn't do that in the real world, as you say. If I wanted to take all my guys out for a bike ride, we'd all be spread out over 10 miles after the first hour. And it would be really difficult to control, and you can't really coach it at the time. So that's the first thing. As far as the London trip is concerned, obviously, my main reason for doing it is to get to know you guys, particularly, as I say, the guys who live in the South and in London area. And I don't expect you all to travel to me. Now that I've got a building base in London, and we've got quite a few of you now, it's a simple, weekend away for me to nip down, be able to get you guys together. And so the relationship building and the social aspect is, in this instance, is as much a part of what I'm doing, right, as opposed to the actual training sessions. It will be loosely structured for the weekend. We'll, as we've discussed, we might try to get a swim session in if we can book something. We may involve a park run, or we might run some of the major parks in London to just, for something that is a bit novel and something where we can chat. And then hopefully if we can get out to Box Hill for a nice long ride, that'd be great as well. So they won't be as structured as we might normally do, but the benefits of you guys getting to know each other in London and maybe social, the wider TTT community as well. Yeah, great. So that's what we're looking for on that weekend. That's the major point of coming down, and then obviously I can chat to you. I'll happily look at any injuries while I'm there. It'll just be, you've got me for 48 hours, so let's do what we can. No,
I'm looking forward to it. I mean, I've got that in the diary. It's all listed with the boss, so we're all good on that front.
That's the main thing.
Okay. I think we've covered quite a bit. The next set of questions that I prepared were, well, I suppose purely these were a little bit selfish, but I did try and think about what some of the viewers might be thinking. They are aiming to be quick fire, but you can be as quick fire as you want, or you can be a little bit more detailed. I'm really not bothered. So I'm going to start with favorite triathlete or triathletes and why.
I suppose historically, the first ones that I ever became aware of were people like Tim Don and Simon Lessing. They were sort of the big names when I first got interested in it. They were the ones who were achieving, so they were the ones I was looking at. It quickly became the Brownlees, obviously, particularly Alistair, from a point of cheering for our home nation, and that's fantastic, isn't it? To have somebody who's winning so much. It gives you that pride
absolutely.
In the UK and in Britain and in the Northwest, even, or the north of England again. So that's like the patriotism.
Yeah, it brings the sport to the forefront, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah. But as far as actual triathletes are concerned, the ones I would probably admire the most are people like Frodeno and Gomez, because they just conduct themselves in such a professional manner. There's no over aggressiveness and psyching other people out necessarily. They're just calm, collected. They conduct themselves in a really professional manner, and they obviously race to a high level. So they're the guys I would want to model myself on them, I suppose, if I was at their level. Okay, great.
You might have already answered this one, but most memorable or best experience in triathlon?
I'll cut it down though. The happiest I have ever been, possibly in my life, although if my wife's watching this, that's not a great way to live. But certainly in recent years, the happiest I have been is in Kona, the day before the Ironman, stood on Digby Beach, that little triangle of sand where the athletes enter the water, speedos on, blazing sun, turtle in the water right in front of my feet. And I just looked around and I literally almost started crying. As soft as that sounds, it was just the realization of everything that I've ever put myself through. And that was utterly amazing.
I could imagine. Well, be a lifetime goal for most, I think, that one.
Yeah, it is.
Most triathletes anyway.
Yeah, okay, I do feel lucky from that point of view to be able to do it,
Yeah. What would you say your 3 top training rules are for your athletes?
Train with purpose. So sessions should be in your weekly schedule or your monthly schedule for a reason. They shouldn't just be, otherwise I think what we're doing is we're exercising. We're not really training. Training is exercise with a purpose. And as I've said, I think I've said to all you guys in the past that I coach, if you want to challenge me on a certain session or ask me, why is that there? What is the point? What's the purpose? Why is that in my schedule? I should be able to justify it. And if I can't justify it, ultimately, maybe it shouldn't be there. So that's an important one, is purpose. And then really to look for consistency over like one-off amazing performances, which will likely put you in a bit of a hole, causing severe fatigue for a good few days after, and possibly even risk injury. Consistency day to day and week to week and month to month will produce the results that you want. But mentally, we're often drawn to beating ourselves, to performing a new personal best, because it's reassuring and it gives us confidence and it's quite motivating. But if you look to run a new like 10K PB every week, it will probably happen maybe for 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah,
but then you're disappointed. You're not training in the best way for your long-term development. So I think purpose and consistency is the 2 key factors. And then I suppose the third one is that we need to be just prioritizing what is most important at that point of the year. So it's obviously like periodization. We're not doing the same training week in, week out through the whole season. And we can't stay perma-fit. We shouldn't be looking at being as fit all year round. We need to let that cycle come and go a little bit. And then obviously it's just my job then to try to schedule that in collaboration with the athlete and what their schedule of races is and family commitments and stuff.
Right. Excellent. Person that you look up to in the sport?
Do you know, I as I mentioned before, maybe like Frodeno and sort of Javier Gomez for their way they conduct themselves. Performance-wise, I admire the ability of the human body to perform, such high and a way above what I can do. Right? So I admire like the physiology and the mentality of being able to get these huge, amazing race performances out, like Christian Blumenfeld's a couple of weeks ago, and going back to Frodeno again, and some of the other people who've set world records. But ultimately, I see more value in admiring people who have characteristics that I admire.
Right.
So many of the coaches I work with now, I'm learning from them, and I'm taking
bits and pieces from different people.
Yeah. So I'd rather admire people who've got characteristics that I want to work on in myself than just admire people who are good at sport, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Have you got a favourite discipline?
I shouldn't have, should I? Because that's the ultimate goal for us to be.
We all have, though.
And enjoy triathlon. I am more from a cycling background. So the first sport I really got into, particularly because I had the bad back and everything, was the cycling. And I quickly got quite good at that and got some good results in cycling and time trialing and things like that. So I do still see myself as a cyclist. And one of the issues I had with training myself, and this is what many people will identify with, is if it's a nice day and you've got a bit of extra time on your hands, you might decide to do the session you enjoy the most, because it's like, well, I'll make the most of this weather and I've got a bit of extra time. The family don't need me today. And it's likely then if you see yourself as a runner, you probably go and run in the park. If you see yourself as a cyclist, you'll nip off for a couple of hours in the hills. And that's something that I've noticed, is we need to try to help triathletes identify as a triathlete. So that probably means you have to see yourself as a cyclist, even if you're not from your background. Right. And we have to help you see yourself as a runner, act as a runner, behave as a runner. And obviously the most challenging one in general is swimming, because we accept freely, a lot of us, I'm not a swimmer. I didn't swim as a kid, etc. And that just leads into this self-fulfilling prophecy. And we need people to see themselves as a swimmer if they're going to get better as a swimmer. Yeah,
it's often the least favoured discipline, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not for me, actually. It's one of my favourite, I think. Yeah.
But even if you enjoy it, that's a great start, isn't it? You might not be the best swimmer. That will come, hopefully. If you enjoy it and you kind of see yourself as a swimmer when you go to the pool, and not just as a person going to a leisure pool, then you've already got the head start. You're identifying with the right personality traits, and then you probably get more out of your sessions.
Yeah, great. Okay, what do you find the most frustrating thing in our sport?
I think recently, obviously, there's been the COVID sort of challenges that we've had. I think for a lot of people, the cost of a lot of the equipment is quite inclusive. Like you said, in a way, it's a kind of middle class sport. It's a bit like golf and tennis have kind of been in the past and things. It's trying to allow access. It is easier to coach people if they've got a lot of equipment because they can have more variety in the sessions. I will get more data to be able to feed back and help them.
Of course, yeah.
So sometimes that's quite challenging. Personally, it's more just keeping things in balance. I think it's frustrating that I can't be a professional athlete. I would love, in one sense, I would love to have nothing else to do but to see myself as a pro triathlete.
Yeah.
And sometimes you do slip into that mentality and you ask a lot of yourself. But ultimately, you've only got 100% of yourself to give. Now, you decide where to give that. Now, if you've got to divide it between family and work as well, you've at least got 3 pots in which to put yourself and your time and your energy. Now, if you also want to be a really good husband or a really good father, you can't be 100% triathlon.
No,
you've got to decide where that stops and how much to put into each. And again, I find that quite frustrating because we're motivated and driven in one direction, but we do ultimately have to realize that we need good balance. Yeah.
Okay, I think you touched on about the amount of equipment and stuff like that, but what do you consider as the best gadget or piece of training equipment that triathletes could have or should have?
Yeah, I suppose it depends on what level we're talking about, because if you're just coming into the sport, I think you obviously need ideally some form of smartwatch, a GPS watch, whatever, because we need to be able to track the data in some sense, and you need to be able to help pace yourself. So as a basic, you would probably want somebody to have a heart rate monitor and a smartwatch. And if that was all they had, well, we could adapt it for the biking a little bit and we could use it in the pool. So that would get you started with some level of feedback and data and stuff. Obviously, moving on from that, I think by far the most important thing is power meter, probably, power pedals of some sort, so they can be moved from bike to bike. That would be quite useful. And then going on from that, then obviously things that are advantageous, but they become less essential. So I think those 2 would be my top 2. And then it would be more like, not marginal gains, but you're getting towards that. You'd be investing more money for slightly less return, I think.
Great. Okay. Last 2 things.
Yeah.
You might have touched on this. Favorite race and bucket list race.
Favorite race that I've done is probably Ironman Austria. The fact that the scenery is spectacular, the weather was amazing. The race is quite a fast race for an Ironman, but it's not easy. It's quite challenging on the bike. It's the most beautiful lake swim that I've ever done in my life. And the last roughly 800 meters is up a canal. So you swim a loop of the lake, you're then fed into this canal where you can only swim 2 or 3 abreast because it's quite narrow. And there are spectators ringing cowbells on all the bridges and down the side. So it's just stunning as a race. And then bucket list of the things that I've not done. Challenge Roth was the top.
You mentioned you're doing that.
Yeah, I've had to defer that for the last 2 years because of COVID, regulations and stuff. So I'm hoping to get there in July. That will tick off the biggest one of my bucket list races. And then the other ones are things that are a little bit more just slightly off the beaten track, like the Alpe d'Huez triathlon.
I've got that on. That's one of the ones that I'd like to do.
I've ridden up Alpe d'Huez and I've been there on holiday. It's a beautiful place. So it's not branded, so it'll be slightly different feel. So that'll be good. And then the other one is something like Wildflower and maybe some of the American races. I've always wanted to go to St. George in Utah, just again because of the scenery. And this is before it's become a championship race. Just the lake in the middle of the desert, these black asphalt roads through the sandstone cliffs. It's more for that. When I think bucket list now, I think because I've been lucky enough to sort of win a few things and go to Kona, it's a little bit more now. Yes, I'd like to perform well, but I'd also like to go to some amazing places. Yeah.
Sounds good. Brilliant. Phil, it's been great talking to you, and I thank you once again, for taking the time to join me today and work on this, whatever you want to call it, collab, whatever whatever the YouTube term is. But you can rest assured that that's the end of the grilling. Phil does have a YouTube channel himself with some useful videos on it. I've watched a few. I think you've done a few on Training Peaks and how to use that, which are quite useful. But where is the best place for viewers to contact you, Phil?
Anyway, really, I've got a Facebook page which I dedicate to triathlon, which is Phil Ellison Tri. And again, you can follow me on there. I've got my own personal Facebook and Instagram stuff, which is a mix of family and personal as well as triathlon related stuff. And there is the YouTube channel. I'm not even sure what it's called, but I basically, whenever I do some videos for athletes, just some educational stuff to help them along the way, I post them up on there. And there's been a variety of things.
I will put all of those details in the description below anyway, so don't worry about that. Now, as I said, I'm going to be hearing from you later as we've got an online bike session to do with some of the athletes in our group, which I believe is a sweet spot session. So, we'll catch up for that. So there you are, everyone. That's this week's video. It's a bit longer than what I normally do, but I hope you've enjoyed it. A little bit different for me. And we're so close to those 300 subscribers. So please, 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 if you're not subscribed, hit that button for me. Really is appreciated. And I'll see you again sometime next week.